Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy ZainnCraft, and today we're gonna build the Great Plateau from Breath of the Wild in Minecraft. First, I want to just say a huge thanks to everyone who showed support on the first two parts. I really do appreciate it. Last time we built Central Hyrule with locations such as the Colosseum and Castletown ruins. And in today's episode, after coming upon the foot of the Great Plateau in the last episode, I want to go ahead and knock out this region for part 3. If you guys do enjoy, make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe. I hope you guys do enjoy. And without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into tackling the isolated plateau. Roll that intro. So to start us off, I want to go ahead and tackle the walls of the plateau first, just to go ahead and set the precedent. I don't want to build and then paste the walls in last. It might destroy some things later. So I'm going to separate the wall into different parts, but I started with the entrance first. Beginning with 2 basic rectangles, I started with these archways, as the Great Plateau has a lot of intricate designs on the walls. And also the Great Plateau walls kind of come out at a curved angle on some parts of them. So it was kind of fun to put this in. I noticed that there are 2 different modules for the Great Plateau walls, and there are 2 different variants of these yellow rectangular pillar things separating the different modules. So I'm starting with the entrance. And then of course the second module is the module that's going to go around the remaining part of the plateau. And of course in Zainn fashion, I like to build with these different colored concrete so that from a viewer perspective it's easier to see what I'm doing. And then I'll change these colors into my ruined stone brush at the end. Here you can see me starting work on the second module of the plateau, the one that's going to go around the rest of it. And it's funny because both of these modules only maybe took me an hour a piece. The plateau took only about 12-13 days for me to complete, which is only thanks to Axiom and World Edit. So hopefully that means I can get these regions done quicker for you guys, and by a further extent that means the map will be done sooner. But anyway, here you can see me putting in one of the archway designs for this module of the wall. I had to make sure that the wall was thick enough to be able to cut into it this much, and once I got this half of it done, I just copied it to the other side. Last but not least, I saved these different pillar modules that are in between the actual walls. I fixed them up a little bit to make sure that they match what it is in game. Then I just saved them in my blueprint folder within Axiom, and we were ready to go. Now that we got the prerequisites out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into actually building the plateau up, starting by pasting in the walls that we just made. So within Axiom, you can actually rotate objects not only at 45 or 90 degrees. And of course, I know that you can do this within World Edit as well, but the user interface within Axiom allows me to accurately turn and angle the wall based on the cliff outlining from the height map. So here you can just see me putting in the walls in their accurate positions based on the game. This maybe took me only about 20-30 minutes, so not too much. And once I finish going around the entire plateau, we will be ready to jump into the actual fun stuff. So beginning with the Sheikah Shrine, World Painter actually generated a massive cavity right here where it's actually supposed to go. But of course I just fixed that up easily using my tools. The shrine is actually at about a 40-degree angle, so it just made it a bit interesting to build at this angle. But I marked it out with red wood just to keep myself honest on what the angle is supposed to be at. So I started with the giant orb thing in the room where Link awakes, and I also made these pillar modules that look accurate to what they are in the game. And going room by room, I just began to knock out the Shrine of Resurrection very swiftly, putting in the rubble and minor details like that before we made it to the outside. Then using the raw iron block from Conquest, I replaced this white concrete for the entrance of the Sheikah Shrine. Now, of course, not only with the Sheikah Shrine, but the height map did generate a few other cavities all around the map. So you guys saw me fix that up with the blue concrete. And then I began to make my way towards the Sheikah Tower of the Great Plateau, building in some rocks behind the old man's campfire, fixing up the pond where you find the Korok and the rusty sword. Then coming down the path, it appears to be an old plaza between the entrance of the plateau and the Temple of Time's ruins. So I put in my ruin fountain module and I marked out the stairway with red wool before building up these pillar modules. And there seems to be an abundance of these pillars, namely within the pond where the entrance is flooded. I also put in some more of the wall modules here, as well as the Uman Ao shrine. Then coming back to the other side of the ruin entrance, I pasted in the Great Plateau Sheikah Tower, as well as the Boko camp to the right of it, as you can see there. I also began ruining the walls and dressing up this area to make it look very ruined and sandy as it is in game. I also began to make these overhangs on the outer cliffs of the Great Plateau as they are in game as well. Next up, after finishing this area, I began to work on the separated bridge that connects the Eastern Abbey to the Temple of Time. I built the entire thing up first and then I destroyed it in the end. And there was also this diagonal wall on the other side of the bridge, so I put this in as well. There's also some more ruined pillars and this big cobblestone surface on the way to the Eastern Abbey. And speaking of the Eastern Abbey, I pasted in the Job Bai shrine before outlining all of the walls with yellow concrete. I made these walls 2 blocks thick before doing some overhangs with pink concrete, as you just saw me do. I put in some trees and a pond in this area before we were ready to jump into the Eastern Abbey. Now I went off into my sketch world and created these different archways and these pillars. These will not only be copy and pasted numerous times around the Abbey, but as well as other locations within the plateau. So I started by pasting in these pillars as well as all of the different archways in their respective locations. I then used a command to raise up all of the concrete blocks by about 6 before putting in this polished andesite slab border around the top of the wall. And then I began to ruin it, as you can see me doing here. I punched in some custom indentions and I used a combination of slabs and stairs to give me that ruined look. And then I scattered around a bunch of smaller rocks with red concrete just to give the Abbey a little bit more character. Now before jumping to the birch tree region where the old man's hut is, I fixed up these overhangs on the back side of the plateau and punched some more holes in the walls. Using my pink concrete, you guys can see here that we got some really nice overhangs. I also put in a small cave where you knock over the spruce tree to get across the gap here. Then I put in some boulders and some of my spruce trees before diving into work on this area. So after doing the Boko camp, I began to do some terrain work around this area, putting in a bunch of these stone rocks that are scattered around before jumping into the old man's hut. The hut was super fun to design as I used a bunch of different wood variants like fences, slabs, trapdoors to really make it look ruined. And I went with birch for the top as the color of the roof was kind of light in game. And once the roof was roughened up, I began to work on the area around his house. I put in this wagon to the left, as well as the campfire and the log, and I dirtied up the ground around. Now coming on to the interior here, this wasn't difficult at all. I just cluttered it up to make it look very, very messy. And the interior was done. Now coming back outside, I scattered more boulders before putting in the birch trees to really tie in this area. And with this, the entire right side of the plateau was completed. Next up is arguably my favorite part of the plateau, the Temple of Time. There are 3 different buildings here, including the Temple of Time itself. So I wanted to build them separately within my sketch world and then import them back in, as they all had to be pasted in at a specific angle. So I started with the 2 buildings that sit at the foot of the temple. They are the same building, they're just destroyed differently. I began to work my way around it clockwise while I was ruining the walls as I went along. And once the exterior was done, I moved on to the interior, starting with the platform where there's a treasure chest. And then I ended it off by putting in the fallen over pillar as it is in game. Now moving on to the second module and the building that sits right before the temple. This and the previous module are very similar, but they do have slight differences. Firstly, this module here is the one that's the least destroyed out of all 3 buildings. Coming on to the interior here, I put in this nice floor design similar to what it is in game. I then ruined this building as well before putting in this leaning pillar up against the broken ceiling. Now that those were out of the way, I began on the temple itself. Starting with the arched doorway, I put in the steps leading into the temple as well as the Triforce above the door. And then I began to detail the central tower as I was going along, making sure to stay extremely accurate to the game. And I have to say that at this point, this was the best part of building the plateau. At first, I was gonna go with dark oak planks for the roofs of the towers, but I opted to go with mangrove instead as it looked more accurate to the actual game. Now that the central tower was completed, I started work on the two smaller ones on each side of it. I did downscale this tower as I thought that it was too thick in comparison to the central one. And once I made that change, I wrapped up the design for this tower pretty swift-like. Now coming on to the side of the Temple of Time in Breath of the Wild has 6 different windows on each side. So I just built one before copying and pasting it 5 more times, and I made sure to go in as much detail as I could, opting to find a medium between too much detail and a little bit more detailed in the game so that I make sure I wasn't doing too much. Then coming to the back side, I just repeated what I did with the front and sides of the temple. I built half of this outcropping before copying it and mirroring it to the other side. Now coming on to the interior, I put in the same floor module from the 2 buildings formerly, and then I began to work on the different floor levels that sit each side of the entrance. This definitely was my favorite part of the temple outside of actually ruining it, as I just got to watch the entire interior come together. Then last but not least, I began to work on the roof of the interior and the goddess statue that sits in the very center in the back, along with the stairway up to it and the 2 platforms on each side. Once I got done with this, the entire Temple of Time would be completed. Now, with all of the buildings that make up the ruins of the Temple of Time built, I was ready to paste them in at their respective angles. The Temple of Time and the building that sits in front of it right there are actually at the slightest angle. It's at like a 5-degree angle. And once I had them pasted in, I began to work on the actual stairways, which was the easy part. I also put in some more of my pillar modules up here by the Temple of Time, exactly how they are in the game. Now, to top the Temple of Time off, I began to ruin it, putting in every last detail as it is in the game. The ladder here on the side, I put in the broken windows up where you meet the old man. I also put in some broken stone brick rubble on the interior of the temple, as well as some leaves and these stripped spruce logs that are supposed to emulate like beams holding up the roof, but they're broken as the Temple of Time is ruined. I did scatter in some dark oak planks with the mangrove wood on the roof to emulate and symbolize like burnt wood from 100 years ago, as there were a bunch of guardians that kind of destroyed the plateau. And once I finished putting in these last details like this giant rock and the remaining birch trees on the back side, the Temple of Time will be completed. Now with the temple completed, I only had 2 portions of the plateau left. Firstly was the Forest of Spirits. And every detail that you might be able to think of, I made sure to put it in my map, down to every log, every overhang, every weirdly shaped rock formation like this one right here. I also fixed up the overhangs in this area, put in every Boko camp, and I wanted to leave the trees for last, of course, as I wanted to do all of the minor details first. I put in the ruins outside of the Boko camp on the north side of the Forest of Spirits before working on the large fallen over tree. Now this wasn't hard to get down and maybe only took me about 10 minutes. And then I got to work on the first ever stone talus of the map. Building this up was a complete blast and I was really happy with how it turned out. I need to make sure there aren't any in Central Hyrule, and if there are, then I will be sure to go paste them back in. Then further west, I put in this swamp that sits right behind where you fight the stone talus. Nothing too major with this area, just some hollowed logs falling over. And then I came to do this overhang overhang that stretches all the way along the outer wall of the plateau towards the Dig Dog suspension bridge. I also did the overhangs that sit above the Forest of Spirits, as they weren't generated as well. And then I also put in the smaller overhanging ledges exactly how they are in the game. Now lastly, to wrap up this area, I did the overhangs that sit above this Boko Skull camp here in the back. Then finally, to tie this entire area in, I changed all of the dirt on these cliffs to stone. I also changed the grass over there by the Boko Skull stronghold to like mud and coarse dirt, as that area is kind of burnt in the game, so I wanted to emulate that as well. Then finally, to top it all off, I just scattered a bunch of rocks throughout the area, put in all of my trees, and with that, the Forest of Spirits would be completed. One last thing to do before the top half of the Great Plateau was completed. I came back to finish the area on the left side of the Umanao Shrine. Then I put in the remaining walls over here outside of the Forest of Spirits, as I couldn't do it earlier until I fixed up that long overhang. I ruined some more of the walls and fixed the overhang in this area as well. We put the Boko camp at the top of that cliff, and then I put in this tree camp, which is going to sit outside of the waterfall of the Great Plateau. Finally, before we move on to the final part of the plateau, I fixed up this overhang where the Awa Dame Shrine sits on the back side of the plateau. Now, I don't know how this happened, but the wall to Mount Hylia wasn't recorded when I built it, but you guys can see that we did build it up here, and now we're ready to jump into Mount Hylia. So yes, Mount Hylia is the name of the cold environment on the southwestern side of the plateau. And I did a lot of terrain work, as I normally do before doing anything serious. But I did all of this with blue concrete. And what I mean is I'm going to turn this entire area into blue concrete. Reason being is because this section of the plateau's mountains are actually a darker stone. So to differentiate it from the rest of the plateau, I just colored this entire region with blue concrete. Then I could use a brand new block palette and just mask it to the blue concrete. You guys can see that I did terraform the peak of the mountain, as well as put in all of the snow where it needs to go. I also pasted in the 2 shrines that are in this area. And then I began to blend in the edge of where the blue concrete and snow meets so that it has a better transition. And then I colored all of the blue concrete as mentioned earlier before putting in the water and the cave behind the waterfall. Now, to finally wrap up the plateau, I did these ruins by the gate to Mount Hylia. I also did the ruins over by the waterfall, but that footage was lost for some reason as well. There are also some more pillars scattered all around the mountain, so I put these in as well as the campsites. And then I pasted in all of the trees, and with that, Mount Hylia would be completed. Now, with the plateau completed, the final thing to do was to go around and ruin the rest of the walls. I put holes in them, and then I used yellow concrete to kind of draw in rubble as if it was falling out of the mountainside. Think of the yellow concrete as like a landslide, basically. And with all of these finishing touches finally in place, Part 3, the Great Plateau, is completed.
Does it feel good that I'm gone?
Appreciate you guys if you've stuck all the way to the end of this video. If you did like it, leave me a comment, like the video, and subscribe. Tell me what you guys think. As you guys can see here, here's the world map of this entire region, and it looks really, really nice. I really do like it. It's probably my favorite part of the map outside of the castle, so yeah, I really had fun building this one. If you guys didn't check out parts 1 and 2, I'll leave a link to those in the description, as well as put cards throughout the video, so do catch up on those so that you can be up to date with the entire progress. In part 4, we're gonna double back north right past Hyrule Castle to a specific region where a particular darkness sealing sword slumbers. Thank you guys, man, for tuning in. I've been ZainnCraft, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.